Every day, Americans are bombarded with headlines about how their government is spying on, regulating, or downright seizing their property. As a result, more and more people are finding ways to revolt. Say we are now seeing the beginning of the American Revolution version 2.0.
What's the problem here? Can I do something about it?
You're training exactly for what
Hey, send it! Forward! Move!
I'm a sorry citizen. I refuse to recognize you guys. I refuse to recognize you.
That was interesting.
The tactical supervisor for El Paso SRT for Homeland Security Investigation. It's what we use to deliver our team to high-risk warrant services.
Soldiers are learning to use so-called non-lethal weapons designed to subdue unruly or dangerous individuals and crowds.
We are now in a state of martial law and war globally. NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, that Obama has called for and signed, stipulates that even American citizens can now be targeted by the military, picked up, and imprisoned indefinitely without civilian trial, thus throwing out our due process, our habeas corpus clauses. So we are now in the state of martial law. Everything is now creating conditions for a total war state. I mean, McCain called for the whole America becoming part of the so-called battlefield. America is now a battlefield. The whole earth is a battlefield. What we're trying to do then is create a martial law state using Iran as the terrorist enemy or threat.
Now to a controversial bill resurfacing in Congress. The FEMA camp bill allows the government to run at least 6 military installations when a national emergency is declared. These emergency centers would be run by FEMA under the command of the Secretary of Homeland Security.
President Obama claimed the power to keep people in prison indefinitely with no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment.
It's important to note here that this document was created in 2010. Which was under the Obama administration. And it predates the NDAA of 2012, which authorized military detainment of U.S. citizens. This clearly shows a long-term agenda at work. It was created in 2010, however, it's just been recently leaked to the public via the internet. The document outlines military procedures for internment and resettlement of civilians, and it describes the layout and the administration of these internment camps. It clearly states on page 38 that it applies within U.S. territory, and it specifically addresses the detainment of U.S. citizens, as is indicated by the identification procedures for new prisoners on page 146, which states that social security numbers are to be reported alongside their photograph and fingerprints. Included in the list of organizations which may be involved in these internment operations are the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, the Department of Defense, and the United Nations.
Here it is. It's called Agenda 21. Agenda 21.
Agenda 21. Now, it has been adopted by more than 178 governments. I believe there's only 191 on the planet.
We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people.
Thank you, Laura.
Rick, what does population stabilization mean, and how do you seek to enforce that?
Last week, the U.S. Congress passed a bill which repeals posse comitatus, which means that we have now institutionalized and codified martial law.
Mr. Speaker, I understand we're under martial law as declared by the Speaker last night.
It is surreal. You never expect to do this in your own country.
Walking up and down these streets, you don't want to think about the stuff that you're going to have to do. Somebody pops around the corner.
We shoot in America.
Yeah.
And the understanding is that the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution says that you must have probable cause to be able to do a search that does not violate an American's right against unlawful searches and seizures.
Actually, the Fourth Amendment actually protects all of us against unreasonable search and seizure.
But
that's what it says.
The measure is probable cause, I believe.
The amendment says unreasonable search and seizure.
But does it not say probable?
No.
How's it going over at the camp?
Oh, pretty well. Guys are doing a bit exercises now. They do very well.
So the camp situation's going good with the disarmament and things?
Oh, yeah.
Because we saw them over there disarming people. Is that what the exercise is?
Yeah, exercise now, yeah.
Fantastic. Where are you from, sir?
Well, Holland.
Oh, okay.
Thousands of troops are in Southern California tonight taking part in an international exercise known as Dawn Blitz, with much of it involving amphibious landings.
But as 10 News military reporter Bob Lawrence shows us, there was also something seldom seen at Camp Pendleton: tanks.
You're looking at the business end of a Marine M1A1 tank. For many of the Canadian troops who are at Camp Pendleton for Dawn Blitz, it's their first look at the beast.
Yes, yes, very big, a lot of firepower.
Seen here test firing in Afghanistan, they're a game changer in a combat zone. Both French, Canadian, and New Zealand troops are being given an introduction.
When you start working with us, hey, we attract a lot of bullets.
An introduction that included climbing on and inside, but the goal is to learn how to work with them. In this makeshift combat town, the international troops are there to secure it.
I'm going to need you guys to push into here.
With backup from Marine tank crews. Though coalition troops were in Afghanistan together, they didn't really work with one another. And that's what this exercise is all about.
Everyone still has their own little area of operations, and we take care of our area. But sometimes you have to work together.
And that, in a nutshell, is Dawn Blitz. Here, Japanese ground forces work with Marines on patrol tactics on San Clemente Island, and Marines in turn land an MB-22 Osprey on a Japanese ship. Canadian forces seen here take part in room-clearing exercises, the point being
start building that relationship with the NATO forces as well as other countries around the world, so we can say, hey, this is what we have, this is what you guys have, let's start working together.
The approach is simple: crawl, walk, then run. This scenario will get more intense as the exercise continues. Bob Lawrence, 10 News, Camp Pendleton.
A massive amphibious landing at Pendleton's Red Beach is also planned next week as part of this exercise.
I wrote that because there's a bunch of articles that have come out. It started with Rex 84, and it's turned into a bunch of manuals and a bunch of executive orders that put in place martial law. And the military likes to perform war games, so that's why we're seeing military on the streets practicing. They are actually practicing. The tanks that we see on the streets and the National Guard patrolling neighborhoods and the practices that they're doing with our local police department, this is all in preparation for martial law, so that when they do actually lock down the country, they've got everything secured.
People that don't run in these circles and to whom this information is new, Suzanne, they love to say that we're all conspiracy tinfoil hat wearing nuts because we still live in a republic. But I think what we're starting to see, for anybody who is objective at all, is we're seeing a totalitarian system now unveil itself. And ever since essentially 9/11 happened, it's been more and more of these draconian measures that are leading us right down the road to martial law. What do you think will be the cause of the declaration of martial law? Will it be a financial collapse or something altogether different? We've seen a lot of false flags. What do you think would be the cause of martial law?
Well, I had written an article earlier this week from a U.S. Marine informant and also a Deutsche Bank informant. And In 2008, we should have collapsed. We should have gone the way of Greece. The only reason why we didn't was because the global elite and the banking cartels put it off on the Eurozone and collapsed the Eurozone in order to gain sovereign debt. Sovereign debt is when you actually own the physical land. You don't just own the buildings. You don't just own the people and the money. They're extracting wealth so that the only thing that the governments will have left to give them is the actual land that they own. While they're doing this, they're amassing this wealth in order to redirect it toward martial law endeavor, and not just in America, but globally. They want to lock down every country and force us into global governance, eventually force us into a global reserve currency that is like the Bancor that the IMF has been pushing. So in 2008, when Hank Paulson went to the Congress and said that they had to bail out the banks for $700 billion or martial law would be declared, they weren't lying. They went ahead and passed that, and they gave this money to the Chinese. But the Chinese, since then, have been backing their currency, their fiat currency, in gold. And China's been doing this, India's been doing this, and Russia's been doing this.
Out of an overseas military mission, but this is Coconut Grove.
We saw like flashes and shooting, and they like the Black Hawk had like a Gatling gun in the front, and you could hear it open up and fire off in the middle of the night.
But witnesses say the training soared in the skies over Coconut Grove. Over the simulation so real, unknowing witnesses blew up social media. Similar training lit up the skies over Brickell last year. This time it happened near Miami City Hall.
Yep, that's the view outside my window. Oh, there's another one coming in.
trust. Do you trust the government?
Well, did you see him up there? Police are getting a whole lot of calls about those black military helicopters flying over Portland this week. You might have seen them flying over your home. This is video of one spotted over the area on Monday night. The Police Bureau is assisting the Department of Defense with some training exercises. However, because the flights are causing so much concern, they'll now be restricted to the Jantzen Beach area.
This exercise is put together by the Southeast Regional Domestic Security Task Force. These exercises are taking place from Palm Beach all the way to Monroe County to bring together a unified command system from federal, state, and local agencies if a major incident should occur. And it's to test our capabilities of all hazards with an emphasis on terrorist activity.
These drills are meant to do a few things. One, to have a controlled response, good communication between the various agencies, and then testing the equipment. This gives us the opportunity to bring this new equipment, if you will, and to ground test it to see if it works, to see if it's the proper equipment for what's on call. So far, so good. We have our assessors on board. People from Homeland Security are here, and we've had great volunteers from the community and also some help from the local business community. So it's all working out well so far. And you know, we need to do this at least once a year. The threat still remains.
Well, you couldn't see it, but you sure could hear it last night in the skies over Boston. Low-flying helicopters causing a real scare for some people. The 19th Susan Tran is in Boston tonight. Susan, what exactly was happening here?
Well, just imagine hearing the deafening sound of helicopters coming outside of your home and seeing these military helicopters with no lights on, weaving in between all of the city's skyscrapers. For folks who saw this scene, they say it was so exceptionally scary. At one point, a glowing object was seen dropped from a helicopter. It was just one of many mysteries families in Boston were left wondering about.
We saw just the one helicopter at first. Then we saw another one flying around, no idea what was going on, landing on top of the building. So, yeah, myself and my fiance were really pretty freaked out.
Drones could soon be watching us all from overhead. The Federal Aviation Administration is expected to announce plans to expand the use of domestic drones in American airspace. Eyes in the sky, similar to the unmanned aircraft that the United States has been using to target terrorists abroad.
So these people who hold themselves out to be patriots are not. They're nothing more than domestic terrorists.
When are these drones likely to be flying, and how many of them might there be above our heads?
Well, there's a growing number already, Shep, but according to the experts, and indeed the FAA itself, there could be as many as 30,000 of these kind of drones, 30,000 flying overhead within the next decade. Now, obviously, law enforcement agencies love these drones. So what do you think they need this for?
Covina Special Response Team. Did you guys just paint this? Or did they? Oh, you guys, this company didn't?
Someone else did. We just received it installed.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
UN. Coming out of Alabama. UN trucks. Not sure what the hell is going on with this, or why we got UN trucks coming out of Alabama, or at least they're Alabama truckers. No identification on them, just UN.
Bill, I come from a way of life in the military where you don't buy weapons that you don't intend to use. Why would you? And if you look at what the Department of Homeland Security has been purchasing over the last year, it comes out to like 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition, more than 7,000 fully automatic assault weapons, 2,700 MRAP-type vehicles, and now drones. Those are instruments of war. Department of Homeland Security's, who are they going to fight a war against?
How do you answer that?
I don't know. That's a good question.
So these people who hold themselves out to be patriots are not. They're nothing more than domestic terrorists.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Is it far-fetched to imagine that these UN peacekeeping forces would be used against American citizens? The 502nd, another unit from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, is shown here arriving as peacekeepers in Somalia, wearing their UN blue berets and UN insignia. Shortly thereafter, this same unit, the 502nd, was in Arkansas practicing house-to-house searches and seizures in a joint UN training mission called Agile Provider in the spring of 1994. Agile Provider involved 44,000 UN troops, including troops from France and the Netherlands, training in the states of Georgia, North and South Carolina, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Yes, UN troops have been trained in this country in the past, but not in brigade strengths and not in domestic support house-to-house searches and seizures. Many of our congressmen deny that UN troops are being trained in this country at all. But as you can see in these clips from Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, Germans were training here last spring.
Das ist die Frage 1660, die da vom Bodenzug, der Hitschel,
UN training has become so widespread that many of the newspapers around the country have had at least one.
Here in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, riding down 183, we've got armored UN vehicles.
Army forces, National Guard, blocking roads in California and marching around, basically commanding the public. This is what a slow-motion martial law scenario looks like. And I want to explain something. It isn't that martial law is coming. We're under a form of martial law when the feds seized the airports and started searching everyone. We're under martial law when the president dissolves the borders outside of law. We're under tyranny.
Stephen Halbrook and Wisconsin Sheriff David Clark, who this week warned that enforcing any gun laws that would deprive Americans of the right to bear arms could lead to a second American revolution. Sheriff, you've been very vocal, and by the way, I absolutely agree with you. If you wait for 911, then shame on you. You've got to arm yourself and defend yourself once you educate yourself. Well, what's this whole idea of a second revolution? Where's that coming from?
Well, the question was, would I participate in assisting the feds coming into states and going into homes and taking everybody's gun away? And I said, I would not be a part of something like that. And I said, one of the reasons is I wouldn't want to get shot, because the American people are only going to put up with so much before they push back. And I said, if the feds tried to do that, disarm this country, I said, you would see an uprising and maybe a version of the second American Revolution because of that. Just read the Declaration of Independence. It's right in there. So it was talking about the feds coming in and going into homes. Forcing their way into homes and removing firearms. I mean, the thought is preposterous.
But you know what? The thought of it is preposterous, and people are very concerned about it. I mean, this whole idea of identifying gun owners in newspapers and chipping away at these gun rights and getting a registry. I mean, this guy McCarthy, the chief of the third largest police department in the nation, who works for Rahm Emanuel, who's so connected to the White House, is saying, you know what, we should be able to put a chip in your gun. Are you crazy? In Mexico, lawmakers are actually considering asking the United States to provide a registry of all gun owners in the border states, California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. Their reasoning is claiming that it'll make tracing guns used in violent crimes easier. Talk to me.
Registration is prohibited by U.S. law. It's been for a long time. Our first law prohibiting registration was passed right before World War II because we saw the experience of Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia. Registration means confiscation. The Firearms Owners Protection Act signed by President Reagan prohibits registration. The background check system prohibits it because we don't want a system in our country where all the citizens are, their names and identities are given to the government. And can you imagine turning this over to the Mexicans? You've already got members of the Mexican police and military selling their guns to drug traffickers.